All right, for today, we're going to be looking at factoring. What factoring is that I want the two things that multiplied will equal to this polynomial. So what I'm going to do here, because my first number is a 1, I'm just going to look into what I call the diamond method or the X method. I'm going to be looking for two numbers that when I multiply them is equal to negative 50. You can see where I got my negative 50 from. So multiplied equals negative 50, but when I add my numbers is equal to negative 5. You can see where I got my negative 5 from. Once again, the numbers multiplied is negative 50. The numbers added is negative 5. Because they multiplied to a negative, I know the signs are different. In addition, I know when the signs are different, I know I subtract my numbers. So let me start thinking of the numbers that multiplied equal to 50. I start with 1 times 50. From 1, I can increase my list as much as I want to, as far as I need to go. Notice I keep on increasing by 1. So once again, I'm looking for two numbers that multiply equals 50, but when I subtract them is 5. 1 and 50, subtract them is not 5, so I move on. 2 times 25. So the way I come out with the 25, I can easily go 50 divided by 2. All right. When I subtract them is not 5, so I continue going. 50 divided by 3 gives me a decimal, so that's not going to work. 50 divided by 4, that also gives me a decimal. That's not going to work. 50 divided by 5 is 10. When I subtract these two numbers, it is 5. So those are the two numbers I'm looking for. I'm looking at positive 5, negative 10. The bigger number in this case is negative because I want my result to be negative. So now from here, I'm going to go straight to my answer, to my factors. When my first number in my polynomial is a 1, I go straight to parentheses, and my answer will be p plus 5, p minus 10. You see where I get the plus 5 and the minus 10 from. Now the p came from half of the first term. If I would have gotten p to the 6 to begin with, at the beginning of each of my parentheses, I would have said p to the 3, right? Half. My exponent is half. All right, let's take a look at this one. I'm looking at two numbers that when I multiply them is equal to negative 40, but when I add them is equal to positive 3. Because they multiply to a negative, I know the signs are different. And I start with 1 times 40. Now, when I add this, doesn't equal to 3. Once again, my list here, I can go as far as I need to go. So let's see. 40 divided by 2, that gives me 20. When I subtract them, is not 3. All right, 40 divided by 3, that gives me a decimal. 40 divided by 4, that gives me 10. When I subtract them, is not 3. 40 divided by 5 is 8. When I subtract them, it is 3. So that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at positive 8, negative 5. In this case, I want the bigger number to be positive because they add up to positive 3. So my answer here will be x plus 8, x minus 5. The order of the parentheses does not matter. So if instead of x plus 8, x minus 5, I said x minus 5 and x plus 8, the answer is still correct. The order of the parentheses, we call those factors, the order of the factors does not matter. All right, now let's take a look at what if I have 4 terms to begin with. What I'm going to do, I'm going to be looking at 2 terms at a time. I'm going to do the distributive property backwards. Numbers-wise, I'm thinking 8 and 2, I can divide them both by 2. Letter-wise, I know I'm going to subtract the exponents, so I'm going to go with the smallest exponent. So I'm going to go x to the second. I said I'm doing the distributive property backwards, so I'm going to divide by 2x squared. So looking at the first one, 8 divided by 2, that's 4. Subtract the exponents, so I get x to the 1. And there's a minus. 2 divided by 2 is 1. Subtract the exponents, so I don't have any more x's. Now let's take a look at the last 2 terms. 12x minus 3. Let me divide each by 3. Let me divide each by 3. 12 divided by 3 is 4x. There's a minus. 3 divided by 3 is 1. I'm supposed to get my two parentheses to match, which I do. So my factors in this case, one of them is going to be 4x minus 1, which is the parentheses that matches. My other factor is going to be 2x squared plus 3. It's basically what I have outside of the parentheses. No spaces in between. It's all combined. All right, let's take a look at number 4. Numbers wise, 32 and 28, I can divide each by 4. Letter wise, x squared. I go by the smallest exponent. So let me divide each by 4 and subtract the exponents on the x. So that gives me 8x minus 7. Looking at the last two terms, let me divide each by a positive 5. I cannot withdraw an x because my last term, 35, does not have an x. So I'm going to divide each by 5. That gives me 8x minus 7. I see that my parentheses match, which is what I want. So my factors are 8x minus 7 and 4x squared plus 5.